mentions that the idea of Rachel was Yefei Teyar v'Yefei Mareh. He says the beauty and in a way that it was in proportion and also blended together all the features as one. He says because Rachel is Malchus, Datzilus. And Malchus Datzilus consists of all kinds of souls. There are certain souls that they are in nature more elevating. There are certain souls that their thing is more giving, drawing down. And since she was a blend of all, therefore she had all these qualities. And this is basically, to bring it down in a practical sense, this means to say that when we find ourselves in this physical world, the ultimate aim why we are in this physical world is in order that we should bring everything down in a practical sense. And as much detail, in detail, as we can reach out to people, we can reach out to subjects, and we can reach out to whatever we come in touch with. By divine providence, we have this potential that we need to accomplish in world and draw it down, not that it should remain in a higher world. It's like, my heart is Jewish, or my this is Jewish, but basically, if a person's heart is Jewish, then he's an angel, he's up there. We're in a practical world, and therefore we need to bring down everything in a practical sense. And this is also an interesting lesson. We just have entered the month of Adar. This year it's a leap year. There's 2 others. A leap year teaches us that we are adjusting the solar year and the lunar year. What is the difference between the solar and the lunar? The solar is basically the sun. The lunar is the moon. The solar is the giving one. The solar is the one that gives. There's a constant light that is being generated from the sun, and the moon is receiving the light from the sun. The moon is a reflection from the sun. Lesla megarmor klum. The Zohar tells us that the moon does not have its own light. It is completely a receiver. On the other hand, we say we adjust them. When it comes to such a year, we add an additional month. In the time of the temple, when they didn't work with a calendar, with calculations, we potentially could have had 2 Purims. Because when did they decide to add the second month? After the first month, they commemorated Purim. They realized they're not ready for Pesach yet. The season is not there yet. The spring is not really showing yet. And therefore, they added another Adar. They repeated everything again. There are 2 Purims. And that happened more than once. They made the first Adar. They didn't know what's going to happen. And then by the 29th of Adar, the Sanhedrin had to get it together and decide they might need another Purim. They added another 30 days. Now we know ahead of time. But now we might have it in a different way. Because now, if Mashiach comes in the first Adar, after Purim Katan, and he says, there's no need for a second Adar, we can go into Purim, into Pesach, then Purim falls out of the calendar. Al Kopanim, getting back to this Inyan, Benegea, to adjusting the sun and the moon, it's basically one is a giver, one is a receiver. Every one of us has the potential of giving and receiving. And we just have to bring it out in us. An interesting example that the Rebbe once mentions, an example of a person standing and praying, and a poor person comes over and asks for a donation. So the person argues and says, wait a minute, I'm now in a mode of the moon. I am a receiver now. I'm standing in front of my master. How could you expect I should be a giver? So the Rebbe continues and says, you're right. You're in a mode of a receiver. But you should also know that since this was given to you, this test, this experience, this shows that you also have the potential of giving. And therefore this poor person is there exactly in this time, while you figure you're only in the mode of a receiver, you're also a giver. And this is the potential that every one of us has. And when it speaks about giving, it's not just giving in charity, it's also giving in a spiritual sense, sharing with others, or bringing down things in a practical sense, if it's fulfillment, Torah mitzvahs. And that is that it has to come down this physical world. This was the aim of Yankiv. Taking from very high and bringing down very low, a very practical person. And everything about him reflected this concept. And the Eibishter should help that we should be able to accomplish in world and use our talents for that in the fullest measure, and accomplish that this world should be a refined world, and this should usher in the redemption.
Amen. Good question.
Okay.
He said before that Leah is the source of thought, but we see that the Torah says that she spoke much more than Rachel, and her daughter Dinah was known as the one who went out to speak, and it says that she followed her mother. So how do we fix that up? If she comes from the level of thought, she was the one that spoke the most and went out of her way, right? Or
Okay, right. I mean, you see how when every child was born, what she said,
right.
and everything is mentioned. I never saw an explanation for that.
Okay.
But it's we're talking about on the spiritual level. This is what the names represent.
Okay, when it comes to Lavan, you said that he represented the source, the highest source, but he was full of evil. They said he was
Okay, so we find that in a lot of different things in Chassidus and Kabbalah, we find that everything that's very high, when it comes down here, falls down very low. For example, the Eir HaChaim HaKodesh writes in Parshas Tzav, I think, or Shmini, he says like this: a lion up there in the heavenly chariot is on the right side. The ox is on the left side. The lion is on the right side, which shows positive. So he says, why is it when it comes down in this physical world, it's an unkosher animal? A lion is an unkosher animal, an ox is a kosher animal. So he answers it like this. It's an interesting concept. It is a very high revelation. In order that it should come down here, there is no appropriate vessel that should serve as the body of such a revelation, besides something that's completely alien and unkosher. Remote completely. And that's not so sensitive, and therefore it can be a vessel to contain it. This is the way the Eir HaChaim HaKodesh explains. In Lashon Achsidus, it's the Rav Shneur Zalman of Liadi says, it's like a stone that's on top of the wall. When it falls further than the other stones. In the expression of the Mittel Rebbe says the expression in Hebrew, Kol HaGovea b'Yeser, Neifel Lamata Yeser. Everything that's very high falls very low when it falls. And he brings an example of 3 examples: light, water, and ice. I'll just mention the example of light and water. Light, he says, in order that a light should shine further, you need a bigger torch. The bigger the torch, the further it reaches out. Water. When you have water, you have water that's in a vessel, it's contained in a vessel. Once it pours over, it can pour over, it can reach the further plates outside of the vessel. A distant from the vessel, spiritually and physically, or physically and spiritually. Mm-hmm. So therefore the same thing is also in regards to Lavan. Lavan up there is a very pure level. But here Lamata, he's Lavan Harami. He's not a trusted person. The same thing you find by another word, the interesting word. Oineg. Oineg means pleasure. Once had a whole talk of what pleasure is. It's the highest characteristic in a person's soul. Now turn around the letters, you have the word nega, which is a leprosy. Exactly the opposite. And not just it's the lowest level. A person that has a leprosy was not permitted to live in Yerushalayim. Sent out of 3 camps, 3 machnas. So this shows everything very high has to, when it comes down, when it falls down, it can fall down a very low level. It's mentioned, different examples are brought, but this is basically the concept that how the Eir HaChaim HaKodesh explains, or as Rav Shneur Zalman of Liadi explains.
How come you can't explain ice? We're in the middle of it. I know, it's a long thing, right? Next class?
Chassidus explains, speaking about snow that we had this year, a nice amount, that snow shows unsweetened gvuras. Sweetened and a converted gvuras, harshness, to chasadim, to rachamim. That's basically the idea of snow. And the word snow, the idea of snow is, as we say, if our sins will be as red as a red material, kasheleg yalbino. the Almighty will whiten it like the snow.
Wow.
So the Tzemach Tzedek says a very interesting word in that discourse. From this we understand that a snow day is like Yom Kippur.
Wow.
By the way, in terms of practicality and level, you mentioned about the encounters. Is every encounter, no matter what the encounter, is divine appointment?
You speak about encounter in what sense? Encounter
You
as...
meet somebody, the incident happens to you, circumstance, situation takes place, something to learn from, something to apply to.
The Mishnah tells us, Ezu chacham alemed mikol adam. Who is a wise person? Somebody that learns from all. So basically, when a person meets someone, comes in touch with someone, over the cycle of 120 years, over the 120 years, it is basically adding, enhancing the service of the person to the Almighty, and also enhancing the knowledge and the different qualities that that person needs, because everything is by divine providence.
Divine providence.
That's what the Baal Shem Tov taught us, and reflected in the Mishnah, Ezo Chacham Alemed Mikol Adam, that a wise person should know everything that he encounters, that one encounters is an education for the person, an experience.
It's a school. So it depends how you apply yourself, otherwise it keeps coming over and over again.
A person has to, if they merit, it comes over again as a reminder. But a person has to just have that in mind. That why did I meet this person? What did this person teach me? Let me reflect back on what's happening with me, and that's how the person could add that in their personality.
You mentioned merit, Rabbi. Now, in terms of Rachel and Yaakov, could you elaborate on the aspect of the merit from the wife?
Chassidus explains that the wife represents Malchus. Malchus is the attribute of Malchus, which is the attribute of revelation. But Malchus, in its source up there, is higher yet than Zah. The husband and wife, speaking Kabbalistically, the husband and wife is basically Zah and Malchus. Anybody familiar with that word? Zah is an acronym for two words, Ze'er Anpin. These are the attributes that are higher than Malchus. Zah is the giver, Malchus is the receiver. The husband is Zah, Ze'er Anpin, the wife is Malchus. When Mashiach will come, Zah will receive their flow from Malchus. Because the feminist, the idea of Neshei Yisrael, women, will be Nekeva to save of Gava. Nekeva to save of Gava means that they will encompass, they will be the crown, Eishes Chayal Ateres Baila, they will be the crown of the husband, in a revealed way. So therefore because then it will reveal what actually is the ultimate intention of the world and its creation, which is represented in the attribute of Malchus.